Rick believes the use of animals for experimentation is necessary and should continue. Dr. Tom Regan is the author of The Case for Animal Rights. He is appalled at the use of animals in laboratory testing. Dr. Patrick Manning is a veterinarian. He specializes in laboratory animal medicine, care and disease of laboratory animals. He uses animals for laboratory testing every day, and he believes that it's very important to do so. Donald Barnes spent 16 years of his life experimenting on laboratory animals also. Now, he says he's against the use of animals in any kind of laboratory testing. And Cleveland Amory is a longtime advocate of animal rights, president of the Fund for Animals, as well as the author of a best-selling book. I got to give it a plug. I love the man, The Cat Who Came for Christmas. And this is Jennifer Graham. Jennifer made headlines, and if those are headlines, when she bucked the school system a year ago. Why? She refused to dissect a frog in her high school biology class. Well, that case went to court, and she is here to tell you what happened. Let's start with Rick. Rick, pro-experimentation, why?
I myself am the recipient of an experimental drug that I take daily that has made my life worth living again. I have multiple sclerosis. 7 years ago, I had been married for 30 days. I lost all bowel bladder control, and my eyesight started going away, had trouble with my voice, things of this nature. For the next 3 or 4 years, my life was intolerable. I was pretty much of a vegetable. The University of Arizona offered me the use of cyclosporin experimentally in massive doses. I hadn't even thought about animal rights or animal research, but I can remember saying, out of the clear blue sky, has this stuff been tested on animals? Well, of course it had. So several weeks later, when they had done the spinal taps and all that was necessary to find out I was a proper test subject, they started giving me cyclosporin. It was on a Monday that we picked up our supply. And by Wednesday of the same week, I had bowel bladder control back. And I want to tell you, that brings up your self-esteem, something tremendous.
Dr. Regan, how do you answer, as somebody who's against this, how do you answer sitting next to Rick and having him say, look, guys, I'm alive because you've experimented on animals?
Of course, Rick, first off, I think the people who represent the animal rights movement are not any less compassionate in the face of human illness than anyone else, including those people who are incurably ill. And what's important for everyone watching the show to understand is that there is an organization that's diametrically opposed to Rick's organization. It's called the Incurably Ill Against Animal Research, and their numbers grow daily. They're against animal research because they think that it actually retards progress in the treatment of human sickness. And I'll give you a couple examples of that.
Yeah, I don't understand that. In other words, if you're near death, incurably ill, wouldn't you just grab for anything?
No. It's, again, how are we going to set our priorities and how are we going to spend our money? What's our policy going to be? And if you take a look at the war on cancer, for example, the much ballyhooed war on cancer, we've been doing this for 20 years at the cost of $15 billion out of your pocket, my pocket. If you look at the National Research Council, which recently said that we've made no progress in the cure rate in cancer. Now, let's just you and I take a look at have they been studying cancer for the last 20 years. And the way they've been studying it is by doing what they call animal models, mainly rodents in a laboratory. What they've begun to discover is that this is not a good predictor of human cancer, and that the way to understand the etiology of human cancer and the prevention of human cancer and the cure of human cancer is through human cells and tissues.
So we should be experimenting on humans?
No, human cells and tissues. We do experiment on humans all the time. When Rick got that drug, that was an experiment. He just said that himself. I didn't say that. They gave it to him on an experimental basis. He was the experimental subject. But let me just give you another example.
The next step up from dogs.
Let me just give you another example. You take glaucoma and other eye ailments that affect especially the elderly. what happens? How do we understand that? Now, what we've tried to do is understand the human problem by studying animals. And in fact, we've now come to the point to understand that we don't understand the disease. How do you understand the disease? You do it by studying human cells and seeing how they develop. We stand here, we are not against science. We are not against human health. We think that the important thing to realize is that we stand for not only just for the animals, but for the improvement of the quality of human life. There are 40,000 newborn, premature babies that die in America every year. It's one of the worst rates in the world. Argentina has a better infant mortality rate. Singapore has a better infant mortality rate. Why? Here's the explanation. It costs $400 to give essential prenatal care to a woman about diet, exercise, what to avoid, and all the rest of that. $400. But we don't do that. And we don't do it because the people who need the care are people who are poor, and they can't afford the services. We're for saving those 40,000 kids, Don Barnes and Jennifer Graham and Cleveland and Amory and the rest of the movement. We're for saving those kids. And you're not going to do that by doing... We can save those children without doing a single experiment on animals.
What are you saying, Patrick? You're sitting there. What are you thinking when he's talking about
Sally,
this?
you can see that Mr. Simmons represents one view, Mr. Regan another. I think the scientific community is someplace in between.
Are you in between?
I don't think there's any doubt that progress in the health sciences, our health, yours and mine, is largely attributed to research on all other animals on the planet.
In other words, what we've learned from the animals,
right.
we
I
can
think
use
what
in the
needs to
humans.
be appreciated, Sally, is that illness is a universal phenomenon in man and beast alike. A true understanding of illness can be gained by studying animals. It is, of course, unethical and often illegal to study on human beings. Mr. Simmons is extremely fortunate that the effectiveness, the efficacy, if you will, of cyclosporin had undergone many years of research in animals before, in fact, it was used on human beings. Were it not for that, I can assure you that the beneficial effects of that drug would never have been realized were it not for animal experimentation.
I think you've got somewhat of the setup. Do we experiment on animals at all? And if we do, is it going to do us any good? We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to show you some film of these animal experiments. The reason I'm telling you now is this is pretty stiff stuff. And A, you might not want to watch it, or B, you might not want the children to watch it. So either take a break and come right back, or take a break, a little longer break, and then come back. We'll be right back.
This is a scene from a research laboratory where they were doing head impact injury experiments on baboons. And this was a videotape actually filmed by the experimenters. And the only way we found out about it was for people to go in and liberate that tape and bring it out. This is how your tax dollars are spent. And it shows the uncaring and the bad science that goes on behind closed doors. This particular project resulted in no appreciable human benefit. It was funded for 13 years at a rate of $1 million a year. For that $13 million, we could have saved 32,000 of those infant mortalities that I mentioned earlier.
Dr.
How
Manning,
do we spend our money?
You want to comment on that? On his
Sally,
allegations?
The experiments shown here were done at the Head Trauma Laboratory at the University of Pennsylvania. It's been a very widely distributed film. I think most people who see it are absolutely shocked.
Is it valid that we showed it?
Yes, I think it is valid.
Okay.
I think it is valid because for a couple of reasons. One, I think it does represent a very extreme view that is not common in laboratories at all. As a matter of fact, I think this represents a very serious and significant departure from good scientific ethics, and
Don,
many, many things have been done
Is
to
this an
correct it.
extreme case, or are what we're seeing pretty representative?
It was very hard to know, Sally, because we are not allowed into the laboratory. There are no windows into the laboratory unless a group as like the Animal Liberation Front may make that entrance into the laboratory. Just even during the time that the Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institutes of Health was evaluating this laboratory, after the tapes had been liberated, the director of the National Institutes of Health told us this is one of the best laboratories in the country. There's nothing wrong with this laboratory. And of course, as public pressure mounted and we got the tape to our legislators and to our senators, they changed their mind and closed the laboratory, thank goodness, but it should have been closed many years ago. I want to comment, though, on something that Dr. Manning said. He said that it's very clear that all of the major advances in medicine have come through the use of non-human animals in research. And you've noticed I use the term non-human because we're animals too, and I think we forget that a large part of the time. We tend to be the species that believes that we can use all other species for our benefit without consideration of their rights, of their pain, and of their suffering. Tom mentioned cancer, and cancer is a big problem in our society. Cancer and heart disease, the two biggest killers, have been for years. No matter what you've heard about the war on cancer, we're not winning it. May of 1986, New England Journal of Medicine, Dr. Baylor, Dr. Smith had told us that for 98% of the human cancers, mortality data is equal to or worse than it was 35 years ago. Now, literally, hundreds of millions of non-human animals have suffered and died in vain, so that we still have many more people dying of cancer. 1 in 4 of us can expect to get cancer in our lifetime. Now, of that 2%, there's Hodgkin's disease and there's childhood leukemia, and both prognoses are better today. But that didn't come to the use of non-human animals, but through clinical research with humans.
Let's step back, Donald, take a whole long look. How much benefit have we gotten from experiment on animals, in your opinion? Just give me, a lot, a little.
It's impossible to determine, Sally, but like Tom,
our lifespan has doubled since the turn of the century.
Of course it has. I totally agree with you. But the reason
is that because of animals?
You betcha.
No. The reason it's doubled is because of hygiene and because of better diet and because of the fact that we've learned what germs do and what viruses do, and we've moved away from them. As a matter of fact,
my dog isn't going to get rabies because he washes his paws better. I hardly think
McKinley
so.
and McKinley are coming out with a brand new study in the Handbook of Biological Sociology this year that shows that the increase in human longevity is attributable less than 3.5% to medical intervention. What we're talking about is prevention, and what we have in this country is a sickness care system, not a health care system where we start to learn how to live to stay healthy before we get sick and look for that magic bullet that may kill us.
What are you saying, Cleveland?
I'm just saying that if we were able to show you a dog here that was being experimented on to see how much oven cleaner it could eat before it died.
Do they do oven?
They do that.
Why do they give a dog oven cleaner?
Because the LD50 test, which demands that you experiment to see the toxic quality has to be tested on animals. It doesn't have to. The scientists don't need it. They admit they don't need it, but they do it still because of the insurance risks. In other words, every single product in your bathroom, in your kitchen,
Give me other
else,
examples.
hair dyes, cosmetics, the whole rim of things, everything in your bathroom has been fed to an animal, a dog or cat, to see how much it takes to kill half of them.
You mean
it is outrageous.
They test hair dye
on this medicine thing we're talking about.
They test hair dye on the hair of the animals?
They test hair dye. You're going to see coming up in the next film about the hairs, the stuff on the rabbit's eyes, the Dre's test. Yes.
Yeah, could you tell me? You says they feed it to a dog. Right? Having a dog eat that.
It's
the
forced
cleaner
into it.
is the same amount of poison it would take to kill a dog as it would to a human being?
No, it doesn't. But it's still written into what.
Difference, or is it, they just
No, it's an enormous difference, and it never should be done. The scientists themselves say they don't need it, but now they go on doing it. We remember the fuss about Revlon and Avon and all that. They finally put up money so that they would test for alternatives here. We go into the experiments, Tom and Don and me and everybody else, into the Maryland laboratories and the Maryland legislature, and all these people that we were responsible for having the money testified against us. Why? Because they can sit there now and look for alternatives and maybe spend 5 years and getting millions of dollars.
Question.
Yes, if we in the West are doing this to animals, do the Eastern beliefs believe in experimentation on animals, like acupuncture and acupressure?
Well, I think the Buddhists, and Tom knows much more about religions than I do, but my experience has been that the Eastern religions in general are a lot better. Remember, we started off talking about animal rights. When we make this decision, should we do this, should we that, remember in the bottom of your heart, you are a person speaking. If you asked my cat, he'd tell you something different.
Are there cosmetics and household products that are not tested on animals? I would like that opportunity to choose something else.
All over the country they're sold, and that was one of our strongest arguments in the legislature. Beauty Without Cruelty, the Compassion Campaign, you write to Agenda magazine or write to any of our organizations, we'll put you in touch with thousands of products that are not tested.
Here's a gentleman who disagrees.
Hi, my name is Alan Shelton. I'm the chairman of the New Jersey chapter of Incurably Ill for Animal Research. You know, we're getting a very biased viewpoint here, and I'd like the audience to be able to listen to both sides intelligently. Let me give you an example of extremism on the other side. About a year ago, there was an article that appeared in the Baltimore Sun about the use of mosquitoes in AIDS research. It's been a standing question whether AIDS can transmit, whether mosquitoes, rather, can transmit the AIDS virus through a mosquito bite. Research was being done in which mosquitoes were drinking blood contaminated with AIDS. As soon as that happened, one Roberta Wright, who is the head of the Tucson chapter of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, the big establishment animal rights organization, protested that the mosquito's rights and the mosquito's dignity were not being honored. Now, I ask this audience here, do you think that the rights and the dignity of the mosquito is worth more than your husband, your wife, your children, your parents, your loved ones?
We'll let you answer that when we return. The animal rights people have gone too far. Donald, they are trying to protect the mosquito, and you're saying, Donald, I can't hold that.
Well, that kind of facetious comment really obfuscates the whole issue, because, you know, I can tell you about studies in science where they've deprived rats of sleep and they've died, and the conclusion is that sleep does indeed serve a vital physiological function. And this is an article in Science magazine. I can tell you about breaking the wings of ducks and putting them outside and showing that ducks with broken wings die. But this doesn't help the dialogue or us try to find a solution to these problems. I can also tell you that if aspirin and penicillin had been given to guinea pigs, we probably wouldn't have them today, because those two items kill guinea pigs. But the point is, let's look at the mosquito for a moment. I think we have a right to protect ourselves from whatever's hurting us individually, but we must start to respect all life forms, because they fill an ecological niche that is part of that great web of life that ties us all together.
Good time to talk to Jennifer. Jennifer, tell us your story. Respect for life form. You are how old?
I am 16.
All right.
And this year I'll be a senior. But during my sophomore year of high school, I refused to dissect a frog in my biology class because I felt that it was wrong to raise animals and kill them for educational purposes. And the school told me to get a lawyer to defend my decision here. And what happened was I went to the Humane Society of the United States and found a lawyer, and we filed a suit in a federal court. And just recently this month, around August 2nd, the judge ruled in my favor that I could have a clear transcript, I can study by alternative methods. But he told the school that they'd have to find a naturally dead frog and dissect it, and then have me be tested on my knowledge from that.
You know, Sally, I'd like to give the audience another example. We were talking about publications and animal rights. The establishment animal rights publication is called Animals Agenda. Last year, an article appeared in that magazine advocating experimentally keeping brain-dead human beings alive to use for medical experimentation instead of rats or dogs or whatever else is used. You know, there's only one other nation in the history of civilization that has advocated using human beings for medical experimentation.
You know, that's incorrect.
And that's Nazi Germany. I don't think anyone
wait a minute.
Anyone here wants to see America go that route.
The scientific community has done that. They have done that, and they did it with the artificial heart. And I can give you the reference. The scientific community has
after it was
done
first used on animals.
No.
You're twisting the facts. After it was first used on animals.
But you're saying it's okay then to use it on brain-dead humans as long as it was used on animals before? You're being contradictory.
I'm against using. I think people should be able to live and die with dignity. You people are the ones that have that when you talk about living things, you don't include us human beings as part of living things.
Can I interrupt just a minute?
Cliff.
No, please.
Do you know that people that are cruel to animals, there's a huge, people who in childhood are cruel to animals, 25% of all criminals in serious criminal cases were cruel to animals when they were children. Only a tiny fraction of non-criminals were cruel to animals when they were children. One of the examples given was tearing the wings off flies. Now, this gentleman doesn't care about mosquitoes. I don't think wings should be torn off mosquitoes. I think we're talking here about an ethic that is very, very important. Just because we happen to be bigger and stronger and able to do anything to these creatures does not mean that God gave us the right to do it.
What do you think about Jennifer refusing to dissect
I think it was one of the most brilliant cases. She had been very modest. They actually gave her a very low grade in biology. They would have ruined her entire schoolwork. Her mother is sitting right there in the audience over there. And I think that all of us in this, and all of us in this audience should be proud of this heroic work.
I was just wondering, have any of these experiments ever been regulated by the government? I mean, as to how many cows can be killed or how many dogs can be killed per year, per month? I mean, does everybody just say, whoopee, let's go for it?
Well, there is an Animal Welfare Act. There's no question
It's all
about
controlled,
that. And it's been updated over the years.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me get some comments from the audience.
Did you hear him say it's all controlled?
Yes.
You know, you're not talking even a word of truth. The cruelest experiment I saw this year was the sewing of eyes of kittens and rotating them in a drum. That man is head of the animal care panel of his university, Berkeley, and not one experiment has ever been stopped for cruelty there.
I did not say that. I said it goes before the Animal Care Committee, just as was said.
And they're all people getting money for doing things, and you know that as well as I do.
Your philosophy.
What were they doing with the animals' eyes sewn closed? What were they doing?
I'm sorry,
Sally,
Judge Allen.
I'd like to say something
Allen
about this for just a minute, if
in
you will,
Portland,
Mr.
Oregon,
Reagan.
recently said that this animal care committee is like having the foxes guard the chickens. That is, the people who are authorizing what's being done and who can do it and how they can do it and when they can do it are part of the system.
That's a very unfortunate comment,
That's Judge
Sally.
Allen.
Is it not true?
I think that there are many extraordinarily conscientious members of the community at large throughout this nation who are members of animal care committees.
Give us some examples of experiments they've stopped.
Stop.
Well, you know, I
If you please,
I was in
let
research
me
for 16
continue.
years. I
Let
haven't
me
been asked to be
continue.
on one.
Every institution that uses animals must have an animal care committee. I can cite the University of Minnesota as an example, but it is typical of many others. We have student members, we have civil servants on our committee, and we have a member of the community at large.
Question.
These people do review laboratories. Laboratories are not closed spaces in which
I'm asking you
clandestine
how many
activities...
experiments they stopped. And they said this damn experiment that they did to rotating the cat's eyeballs or whatever they did, or the wound lab where they shoot cats by the thousands, even though Weinberger said we weren't to shoot dogs and cats, he didn't think we cared about other animals too. But they don't stop anything, Doc. And you know this as well as I do.
Question.
Excuse me. I'm a Hindu. I don't believe in killing even ants. But I'm a microbiologist by profession. Now, I know if it wasn't for the animal research, you wouldn't be able to go to the hospital and have a surgery and put anesthesia put on it. It was put on animal before, number one. Number two is the vaccine. How many people had a vaccine? Almost everybody's vaccine. You wouldn't have it without it. Again, I'm a Hindu. As my wife knows, about 11 months ago, I quit eating meat because I believe that it's cruel to the animals. But at the same time, I work at the local hospital. I kill what is called microorganisms. I don't see anything wrong in killing microorganisms when I save the person who is suffering for Legionnaire's disease. I think there has to be some kind of a moderation to this thing. If there is a government regulations, of course, people can be part of the whole committee and moderate. What we're talking about is the moderation. We have the ethics here. At the same time, we want to save our lives and our children's lives. Where do we draw the lines?
You know, I applaud you for stopping eating meat because...
Can I take a break and then come right back? I promise I'll start with you, Don. We'll be right back.
We applaud this gentleman's decision not to eat meat. That's a large part of what we're concerned about, too, because there are 5 to 6 billion animals that suffer every year, and that doesn't count the human animals that suffer from eating meat-based products. So that's all part of the same picture. But, you know, you said you stopped eating meat about 11 months ago. You made a decision to change your behavior. I made a decision to change my behavior from coming out of the laboratory when I saw that the work that I had done and that my peers had done for 16 years had gone for naught, and thousands of monkeys had died because of it. If the National Institutes of Health and Department of Health and Human Services had begun funding ways to look for alternatives so we could study microbiology on the human system, I suspect we'd be much further ahead in human health today than we have been. So let's start looking for alternatives and keep it fresh in your mind. You may change your behavior in the laboratory in the very near future. I hope so.
Tom?
Yeah, I had said earlier at the top of the show about how it is that the people in the animal rights movement aren't any more lacking in compassion for human illness and sickness than anybody else, on the contrary. And there is the organization, the Incurably Ill, against this sort of research. And I think that what's important is we sense in the movement a real crisis of confidence, and we understand that the public's beginning to experience this crisis as well. I mean, here, for example, is Rick going around the country talking about the importance of animal research so that we can save human life. But, Rick, you're still a heavy smoker, aren't you?
Yes.
We'll take a break. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Question.
No, and actually, if I could just amplify on that, see, because the Surgeon General of the United States recently said the major contributing causes to the major killers in America, lung cancer, other forms of cancer, cancer of the colon, cancer in the stomach, heart attacks, strokes, and so on, have to do with the kind of lifestyle that this guy leads as he goes around the country talking about why we should do animal research. Rick? Let me just finish. We have a hard time taking that seriously. But secondly, like, Doctor, I'm sure you say that you would use alternatives in the laboratory if they existed, right? I mean, yes. I'm sure you would say that. That's what they all say. I want to know, what kind of toothpaste do you use?
I don't recall the brand name.
I mean, like,
generic.
Yeah. What kind of shampoo do you use?
I just use bar soap.
Yeah. My guess is that this doctor here, who says he'd use alternatives in the lab if they existed, does not use alternatives in his bathroom when they already do, because there are cruelty-free products that have not been tested on animals. We find that to be a crisis of confidence. Why should we believe what these people say about what they do in the laboratory when they don't do it in their bathroom?
Rick, you want to answer that? I'm going to ask you all on the panel to go very, very quickly. We have a lot of thoughts in the audience.
Okay, I'm the president of the Incurably Ill for Animal Research. We know that every cure, every prevention that's been found since the turn of the century has been through animal research. Everybody that you know that has diabetes would be dead today if it was not for animal research.
Question.
They are jeopardizing our chances for a cure.
It is not true, you know that, and
they're theorizing we're in the
foxhole. You do not have the credentials to say that. I'm sorry you're ill, but I don't see your degrees in biology or in any other scientific pursuit. I challenge your credentials.
Question.
I'd like to address the question to either Cleveland or Donald, if they have seen the Faces of Death videotape series, and what do they think of animal mutilation as entertainment?
I think that is the farthest out of all. One of the things that bothers me about what we're talking today is we're getting into cancer and heart trouble and things where there, as Sally said at the top of the show, there are two sides. This was a show about animal rights. When first I met your hostess, Sally Jesse, she couldn't read or write. She was in Puerto Rico, but she had a wonderful voice, and everybody loved her voice, and she was on the radio there, and she took up for the Fund for Animals, which was working for, at that time, for spaying and neutering in that difficult land to work for animals.
But it worked.
From that time, we have been I really know that we should be discussing all the other areas.
So,
the
wait,
horse that dropped dead on the streets of New York. I just got back from San Diego, where the world's leading zoo, the San Diego Zoo, beat for 2 days an elephant, intermittently for 2 days, 6 trainers with axe handles.
Why?
To teach the animal discipline so they could master it. Now this, if the leading zoo in the country believes in this, we have got a lot of problems out there. You are never entitled. They sent a rotten message around the world, and it was a lying message. And I hope to God that elephant, who elephants do remember, remembers one day when one of those trainers...
Cleveland and Donald, you got to look into that video. There are what, 4 of them? 4 of them. I think I've seen 4 of them, and all involve mutilation of animals.
Cleveland, that's animal welfare, and everybody's in favor of animal welfare.
No, they're not. Not necessarily.
Just not animal rights.
I'd like to know whether you're aware of the fact that some of the testing that has been previously required on animals has been changed. In other words, the number of animals required for a test for the FDA is no longer the same number that was required previously. I have Sjogren's syndrome. It's an autoimmune disease. It's considered a rare disorder. Most doctors can't diagnose it. I went around for a year before I could be diagnosed. And I need help. I don't want to go through the rest of my life feeling ill, being unable to function. I have a brain, I have a family, I have people I want to be with. There are thousands of people like me, and we need animals who can be tested on. Now, there's only one kind at
You've been
moment.
told you need animals to be tested on.
Does she not?
True.
No. Does she not?
Can I respond to that?
No, she does
May I respond to that, please?
She certainly does.
Just a minute. There is only a certain form of mice at the moment whom they can give symptoms that are similar to Sjogren's syndrome. The lifespan of a mouse is quite different from the lifespan of a human.
Is she wrong that she doesn't need animals? Let me just get to that. Yes, no.
She's right.
She's right.
The key to the development of the cures that we're looking for does not lie down that path. That's stagecoach methodology. We
can do something more advanced. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
May I come back? Yeah.
Animals and animal rights. Mr. Fitzgerald. Yes, a hunter, sir. Can we talk a bit about that? How long have you been hunting?
Approximately 25 years.
And you are pro-hunting. Can you tell us why?
Well, first of all, I love the outdoors. I believe in responsible wildlife management through controlled hunting and trapping. I don't think that, I think the only difference between me eating venison and you having a Big Mac is that I go out in the woods and I have to kill the deer while somebody kills your Big Mac for you. I believe that hunters have been paying for wildlife restoration for the last 50 years, and wildlife populations have benefited from it.
Okay, what is he saying something that's not correct in your opinion?
Well, hunters have paid for some wildlife restoration, but what they've done is they've paid to propagate game populations to kill them. Every year there's a war on wildlife conducted. Over 150 million animals are killed by hunters every year. The mourning dove, a gentle, inoffensive creature, over 50 million of them the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates are killed by hunters.
What are they doing with the doves?
Some of them eat them, some of them throw them away. They're animated targets, and that's what animals are, animated targets for hunters. It's a blood sport, and I think in any civilized society should rid itself of it.
Can I make this comment? On him saying that hunters are destroying wildlife populations, I can give you a perfectly good example of a wildlife population that has been restored through the efforts and funds of hunters, and it's called the wild turkey. The wild turkey disappeared from Connecticut in the early 1800s.
Sir, before you give us this wonderful
why don't you let me finish?
I will let you finish, but you know you want the wild turkey so you can go out there and bop it. You don't want it for any other reason.
By hunters, by Pittman Robinson Act.
I wish it had
White-tailed deer,
so you couldn't go out there with your bloody guns and shoot it.
In the early 1900s, there's over 17 million white-tailed deer in the United States, Connecticut.
Oh, come on. The more deer.
Increasing wildlife populations is wrong? Is that wrong, especially when the wild turkey...
I'll answer it. Yes, it's wrong if you're raising them to kill them. In Connecticut, they stock forests with 40,000 pheasants every year. It's not an indigenous species. It's from Europe, but they put them out there to shoot them. Hunters kill 40%. Another 40% die of the cold and starvation. You're the people who cause starvation. You're the people who cause unnecessary killing. It's a blood sport. It needs to end.
Like I said, countries have restored wildlife populations through the fees and their hunting license fees, $4.4 billion in hunting license fees since 1936.
What would we do for that?
The owners argued that in the 17th and 18th century that slavery was important to the southern economy. That's your argument, that if we pay for it, then we can do anything. Might doesn't make right.
Question from this woman.
When I worked for an environmental organization in Connecticut, I read a publication from the State Wildlife Bureau, and I got into supporting animal rights after reading the magazine from the Wildlife Bureau saying, hey, don't be shy, hunters. Go out and get those wild turkeys. They're shy. You can get them. Go on, do it. How do our hunters respond to that?
Yes, Tom?
Well,
not shy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's again part of the crisis of confidence, the general theme that I want to leave with you. I mean, people saying we're really concerned about health and leaving a lifestyle that's going to kill them. Now we're supposed to believe that somebody's being kind to animals by blowing them apart. It seems to me that really what's interesting is the kind of psychopathology of the hunter. And, you know, we want to not only save the animals, we want to help the hunter. My view is that anyone who goes out with a gun to blow an animal away has some real doubt about their masculinity or their sense of achievement. And I just want to say, I'm sorry, I want to say, please, I want to say that we're compassionate for the hunter. We just want to tell you there really is something better to do than to put your camis on, oil a gun, get a six-pack, and go to bed and watch Ted Koppel. There really is something better for you to do.
It's not just shotguns that they use. If it wasn't sport, why do they use bows and arrows? Why do they use primitive muzzle-loaded guns? The crippling rates of bows and arrows are over 50% for deer. Over 20% of all ducks, 17 million ducks are shot every year. 20% of them go off, the hunters don't retrieve them, they're crippled, and they die a slow
What about the terrorist acts committed by animal rights towards institutions of research? The City of Hope in California, arsons here, people going to jail. Terroristic acts against people trying to find cures for our
not against
diseases.
people, but against property. And of course, I'm not saying that we would encourage this kind of thing, but no animals, human or non-human, have been attacked or been hurt in any act by any animal rights person. I do want to say about the hunter, though, he made a very important point. He said there's no difference between eating a deer or whatever game it is you shot and a Big Mac down the road, and I totally agree with him. We do allow other people to do our killing for us, and we have to think very seriously about that, because we weren't put on this earth to eat other animals, to eat the corpses of other animals, and it's not good for us. It causes a great many diseases.
Question.
I just have a comment to this man over here. Don't you feel guilty after you kill these animals? I mean, it's like shooting an innocent baby that can't defend themselves. You know, these animals can't defend themselves, and you go around and you shoot them. I mean, don't you feel guilty?
No, I don't.
Oh,
He's saying I have to go over to him with the microphone. Sorry.
How would you like to see a deer starving to death because of overpopulation?
Wait, this woman's applauding. Hold on. Why were you applauding?
Because I think that if they shoot a pheasant or a deer or anything like that, it's for food. A lot of them do it for food.
I mean, these poor animals are out there. They can't even defend themselves. They can't say anything for themselves.
How about all these deer that they have that go and ruin your crops and everything because they don't have anything to eat?
You can plant more crops. I mean, you know, there's...
Yeah. Lady, I live on a farm, and I'll tell you, the deer come through, and they are so hungry that they're eating the flowers and severe damage.
Sally, the man there, Wayne Pacelli, that so brilliantly defended the anti-hunting case, will tell this woman every day you want to hear it. They stock those deer to make shooting galleries, to have them get into your crops.
They do not...
They manage populations on what's called a maximum sustained yield basis. Deer are treated as a crop. They kill primarily males, and then the population bounces back year after year so they can shoot them up. It's maximum sustained yield. And what they do is they accelerate the birth rate. After they kill about 20% of the animals or 25% of the animals a year, what happens in the spring, studies shows that twice as many fawns are sometimes born. So you're left with as many deer the next year, so the hunters can blow them again.
Sally, the only answer when you come right down to it is to define conservation for the hunter the way he's always defined it for the animal. We've got to find a nice way to shoot him for his own good.
We'll be right back.
No, anyway, I was wondering, well, Connecticut has too many deers right now. They're running out on the road, and people are having accidents and hurting their children, whoever is in the car. Just came back from Florida and found there are children, 2, 3-year-olds that are being eaten by alligators because there are too many. There has to be some kind of a hunting law.
I'd like to know what all those people up there on the panel have for Thanksgiving and if they're all vegetarians
Well, let me
or what
tell
they
you.
eat.
I'll tell you what I had. I had a tofu turkey because, because you see, I realized that if the United States population cut down just 10% on the meat and the dairy products and the animal products that they eat, we could feed every hungry person on this entire planet. I do not eat them. I do not wear
I
them.
just get the feeling that everybody has their own reasons for either the research or whatever, for their own personal reasons. 6 months ago, somebody would have been against research with using animals, but if all of a sudden they get a disease, all of a sudden they want to use them. It's for their own reasons.
No.
Question.
No.
No problem. People need to be liberated from the intellectual rut they're in. If this is Nazi Germany we're talking about, and I could derive some benefit because humans were experimented on, I wouldn't want it because it's unethical.
Okay, question.
Yeah, Sally, getting back to the topic at hand, in medical experimentation, I'd like to ask any pro-animal person on the panel, how do we do things like microsurgery without using animal role models?
What is the alternative? Let me broaden the topic out to say, as we go down the line, what the alternative is. And give me some, if we aren't going to experiment on animals, Cleveland, and then down the line, what should we do?
Well, number one, we should do what Albert Schweitzer suggested, that every person that has to do something to an animal, and he was, after all, one of the greatest doctors who ever lived, said that they should ask, is what I'm doing necessary? Is what I'm doing to be done as kindly as possible? How much anesthetic can you give it, and so forth? And finally, you don't do it for money. 90% of the research today is in the area where people put in for the grants to get the money to torture the animal.
What's the alternative?
Let me say that even when Cleveland said the word necessary, it bothers me because, you know, just 150 years ago, it was necessary for the slave owners to maintain that institution in the South. It was necessary to keep the vote from women. It was necessary to kill a mouse or a rabbit to tell if a woman is pregnant. Those things are no longer necessary. We have to think beyond that point.
Tom?
Let's look at autopsies, human autopsies. They're down to a low of 8%, and yet we learn a great deal about the human from autopsies. Why aren't they done today? Medical malpractice suits and the fear of them. That's an alternative. How about looking at the case data of our medical files? How about doing epidemiological studies and find out what happens to humans when they have a disease?
What you're saying is there are alternatives. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Transcript of this program, send $3 to Sally Jesse Raphael Transcripts, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007, or call 212-227-READ. Okay, we would like to thank all of our guests, and I'm sure that a lot of you are sitting around like I'm doing and saying, well, you know, I don't know, there's something to be said on either side. As Cleveland said, I happen to be on the animal rights side, but be that as it may, the one thing we agree on is all of us need to be aware of what is being done to animals and to make ourselves better informed. Thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Some members of our audience will receive, and a promotional fee has been provided by
New Shield deodorant.
Join Chuck Woolery for Love Connection tonight at 7. Divorce Court is next.